Hello and welcome to Spill the Tea. True Stories, the place where real life is more fascinating than fiction. Sit back, pour yourself a cup of tea, and let's dive into the moments that stay with us forever. We're starting now. Alice closed the last file, rubbing her eyes tiredly. The clock on the wall showed 10 in the evening. "It's that late already!" she exclaimed in surprise. The phone in her hand immediately reminded her of missed calls. 3 from Paul. Tapping a pen nervously on the desk, she dialed his number. The rings dragged on, and Alice was about to hang up when Paul's displeased voice answered. "Yes, darling?" Her own voice sounded guilty and ingratiating. "I'm sorry." He sighed heavily. Silence hung in the air, but the call didn't disconnect. That was a good sign. "I know I promised to come home earlier today," Alice continued. "But the project—" Paul cut her off sharply. "The project, of course, Alice. I understand. Work is the most important thing. Only you're not marrying a project, you're marrying me." "Paul, we're getting married in a month." "I remember," Alice replied as gently as possible. "All right, I'll wait for you at home," he finally said. "I'll be there soon, darling," she promised. Hanging up, Alice slowly exhaled. How could she have forgotten her promise? However, there was no need to be surprised. Work had been her only passion for many years, until Paul appeared 2 years ago. She smiled, looking at the elegant diamond ring on her finger. She remembered how nervous he was, getting down on one knee, how the violinist played, how people in the restaurant applauded, and how she, through tears of happiness, whispered, "Yes." Only a year had passed, and her relationship with Paul had changed beyond recognition. He blamed her work for it, although Alice had always worked so much. True, she had been promoted a year ago, and the workload had increased many times over. Now, a project that the future of the entire firm depended on was at stake, and Alice simply couldn't let her colleagues down. Paul didn't understand this. When she got home, he was already asleep. Alice gently stroked his head. He snuffled like a child but didn't wake up. Sighing, she went to the bathroom. Tomorrow morning, he would be silent again. Looking back at her from the mirror was a tall, slender, dark-skinned girl with perfectly smooth black bob and huge dark eyes framed by long eyelashes. Could such a beauty really spend all her days in a stuffy office in front of a computer? Alice smiled at her reflection. The decision came instantly. She would take a day off this week. She would freshen up, choose her most beautiful dress, style her hair and do her makeup. She would order a delicious dinner and wine, put on her favorite music, and wait for him to come home from work. Perhaps then he would forgive her. And of course, she would have to promise to work less. Perhaps after the project was completed, that would happen. Or at least she would start leaving work on time. The habit of hard work was ingrained in Alice from early childhood. No one, seeing her now, in an expensive suit, driving a foreign car, with a perfect hairstyle and manicure, would believe that she grew up in a remote village. Although the nearest town was only an hour and a half away, her small homeland was truly a backwater. Broken roads, crooked huts, pigs and cows roaming freely. This is exactly how Alice remembered her village. Alice was raised by her grandmother, although her parents were alive. Her mother divorced her father when Alice was 4, and she barely remembered him. Her first vivid memory was a long, bumpy trip with her mother on an old bus, with many bags and suitcases. At her grandmother's house in the village, little Allie was happy. She played outside all day, ran with the neighborhood children, and ate her grandmother's pies. But her mother didn't like it there, and after a few months, she left for the city. She promised to get settled, find housing, and immediately pick up Alice. At first, she came every 2 weeks, then less often, and then she came with news of her marriage. Alice remembered her mother coming with Uncle Leo. She didn't like him. He tried too hard to seem good, and his smile seemed fake. But her mother was happy with him. they weren't in a hurry to pick up Alice, citing the small apartment. "Are you unhappy with me?" Her grandmother sighed in response to her granddaughter's questions. "No, Grandma," Alice replied, and they continued to live together. Gradually, Alice got used to this life. Her grandmother, Martha, was very kind, cheerful, and never despaired. "The main thing is that we're alive and well," she would repeat. "And as long as our hands and feet are whole, our heads work, everything can be fixed." In the village, they were called Martha the Elder and Little Allie the Younger, and this nickname stuck with her for a long time. But the years took their toll, and Allie soon realized that her grandmother needed her help. Her mother sent a little money at first, but stopped after getting married. Her grandmother's pension was barely enough for two. The vegetable garden, chickens, and goats saved them. But Allie understood that this couldn't go on forever. It was up to her, Allie, to work to provide a decent life for herself and her grandmother in the future. From childhood, she began looking for ways to earn money. She collected berries and mushrooms for resellers, went out early in the morning for medicinal herbs, which she then sold to a visiting man. Her grandmother showed her where to find them, and Allie carried as many bags as she could. She also learned that the store accepted empty glass bottles. Many people in the village saved them but didn't want to wash them. Allie went around to the houses, collected all the bottles, washed them in the yard, and turned them in. She also collected scrap metal with the local boys. Their leader, Freckled Andy, explained the rules. "Everything you find is yours, but nobody cares that you're a girl, and they'll expect you to carry metal for everyone. Carry as much as you can." Allie couldn't carry as much as the boys, but she still earned a decent amount. She quickly realized that she shouldn't look for the heaviest things, but the most expensive: copper. She figured out which car parts contained it and found it at the junkyard. With this money, she bought clothes, shoes, school supplies, and made sure her grandmother's wardrobe lacked nothing. "You're my little breadwinner," her grandmother would say each time with tears of tenderness, accepting the money. "When I grow up, Grandma," Allie would reply, "I'll take you to the city. I'll buy us a big house, and we'll live there. You won't have to work in the garden or keep goats." Martha would just laugh. "I'm happy here, my little one. But if you don't forget your old grandmother, I'll be very happy." At school, Alice was an excellent student, especially excelling in math, physics, social studies, and geography. After 11th grade, she enrolled in economics at the best university in the city. Her mother offered her a place to live, but Alice refused. "I'm fine in the dorm, and it's cramped for you with the little one." Her mother and her husband had a son, Stevie, 2 years earlier, and it seemed after that her mother completely forgot about Alice. Alice pretended not to be offended, but sometimes at night she would cry into her pillow, wondering why her mother loved her less than her brother. At university, Alice also excelled, despite starting work in her first year and sending money to her grandmother every month. "You'll see, Grandma," she would say. "I'll finish university, get a job at a great firm, move you here, and we'll live well." Her grandmother would just smile in response. "The main thing is that you're doing well, granddaughter." Alice passed all her exams with excellent marks, received a red diploma, and was about to go to the village when her mother called. "Allie," she cried into the phone, "your grandmother has died." They all went to the village together: mother, stepfather, Alice, and little Stevie. Alice was so stunned that the following week passed in a blur. While her mother and stepfather dealt with the funeral arrangements, Alice looked after her brother. She sat on the floor in her familiar grandmother's house, watched Stevie play, and thought, what now? She had promised her grandmother she would take her to the city, buy a big house. What was the point of trying now? "Allie, I need to talk," her mother said after the funeral. "Of course, Mom," Alice replied. "We found your grandmother's will," her mother continued. "She wanted the house to go to you." Alice shrugged indifferently. "It doesn't matter to me," she said. "I won't live here anyway. Everything reminds me of Grandma and my childhood." do as you wish," her mother sighed. A week later, Alice gathered her strength and returned to the city. This was the life she had dreamed of: work, career, climbing the ladder. By the age of 28, she had become the youngest managing director in a large company. Only her personal life wasn't working out. Or rather, Alice simply didn't let anyone close until she met Paul. Perhaps it was love at first sight, or maybe it was just time for strong feelings. Mutual attraction arose immediately. Paul was her complete opposite: easygoing, cheerful, carefree. He balanced her seriousness. He owned his own fitness studio. Alice immediately warned him that she worked a lot, to which Paul replied, "That's fine, I love my job too, and if I finish early, I'll cook dinner and wait for my beautiful girl." At first, that's how it was, but lately Paul had been getting increasingly annoyed by her work. They started arguing. Then Alice decided to surprise him. So he wouldn't suspect anything, she behaved as usual. After their argument, she tried to call and text more often. One day, during a call, she asked, "What time are you finishing today?" "Why?" Paul asked cautiously. "Nothing," Alice quickly replied. "It's just that I'll be staying late again today. Sorry." She thought she heard him sigh with relief. "Well, I'll be back late too, so it's fine." Alice smiled. "Thanks for understanding." "Of course, darling." He hung up. "He's probably still upset." Alice sighed. "Never mind. I'll melt his heart today." Her new dress had just arrived, thin, made of delicate red fabric, perfectly accentuating her figure. "In this dress, he'll definitely forgive me," Alice thought contentedly, putting it back in the box. Her colleagues were surprised when she announced she was leaving early, but no one dared to question the boss. Alice arrived home, parked, and was surprised to see Paul's car parked next to hers. He must have taken a taxi today, she thought, too excited to wait for the elevator. Running up to the 5th floor, she opened the door. On the threshold, Alice froze in astonishment. Paul's sneakers and some red women's sandals were lying in the hallway. No, she thought. This only happens in bad comedies. Taking a deep breath, trying to compose herself, she calmly placed the dress box on the floor, took off her shoes, and slowly walked further into the apartment. Almost immediately, she heard her fiancé's voice from the bedroom. Alice slowly entered the room. The first thing she saw was Paul's back, and then the girl. "Well, well," Alice said calmly. "So I wasn't imagining things when I heard the joy in your voice at the news that I would be coming home late today." Paul turned sharply, his eyes filled with such fear that Alice found it amusing. A young blonde girl shrieked loudly and pulled the blanket over herself. "Alice!" Paul breathed out in astonishment. She expected anything: clumsy excuses, pleas for forgiveness. But her fiancé managed to surprise her. He sighed sadly and said, "Well, maybe it's for the best." Then he turned to the girl huddled under the blanket. "Chloe, wait for me in the car, please. I'll be down in half an hour." Alice watched in surprise as Chloe fearfully scrambled out from under the blanket, quickly got dressed, and disappeared into the hallway. A second later, the front door slammed shut. "Okay," Alice said. "And what does all this mean?" Paul sat on the bed, rubbing his temples tiredly. "It means I'm tired and have been thinking for a long time that we should break up." Alice walked over and sat next to him. "But why?" she asked. "I thought we just had some small problems." Her fiancé shook his head. "The problem is deeper. We're too different. It's not just about work. It's that work is more important to you than I am. It always has been." He looked at her. "And I can't live like that. I'm wired differently. I'm not a go-getter. I like my work, but I'm not ready to live in a gym like you live in an office. I want to enjoy life, and you don't know how." "Well, I guess you're right. It will be better for both of us." "I'm sorry," Paul said. He stood up, got a suitcase, and started packing his things. Alice went to the kitchen and sat there until she heard the front door slam shut. "All right," Alice told herself. At least I have my work. The project is almost finished. I'll take a vacation and start a new life. But everything went wrong. A week later, arriving at work, she saw her office being searched. Ms. Alice? A stranger in a black suit addressed her. Yes, she replied in surprise. What's happening? He ignored the question. Please come to your office. I need to take your statement. It turned out that the firm's management was suspected of large-scale fraud. Work was frozen, and the accounts and property of the leading employees were seized. Wait, Alice said. Does that mean my property is also seized? Yes, your car, apartment, and all bank accounts. And for how long? Until the circumstances are clarified, he replied coldly. But I absolutely did not. What should I do? Stay with friends or relatives. Alice signed the papers and drove home. She was allowed to take necessary items before eviction. On the way, she called her lawyer, but he offered no reassurance. The charges are serious, he said. Investigations are long, months, maybe even years. And all this time my property is under arrest? He sighed. I'm afraid so, Ms. Alice. The only place she could go was her old grandmother's house in the village. After her grandmother's death, Alice hadn't been there once. At first glance, the house hadn't changed, only become more dilapidated. Alice took out an old rusted key from her bag. Hello, Grandma, she said quietly. In childhood, the house seemed huge. Now it was small and old, but so familiar. She walked through the room and sat on the bed where she used to sleep. What should I do now, Grandma? She asked the empty room. I thought I had everything. Turns out, everything can be lost in an instant. Fiancé, love, career, money, apartment. What's left? Your little house that I forgot about. And then, for the first time in many years, she cried bitterly and heavily. Alice woke up in the morning to bright sunlight. She hadn't even noticed falling asleep and had forgotten to draw the curtains. Well, there, she sighed. For so many years I woke up to an alarm clock, and yesterday I even forgot to set it. Though why bother now? There's no work. Her stomach rumbled, reminding her she hadn't eaten since yesterday afternoon. In her grandmother's house, of course, there was nothing edible. She needed to go to the store. It was still very early, and Alice decided to spend the time cleaning. As she tidied up, sweeping away the dust that had accumulated over the years, she was unconsciously distracted from her sad thoughts. Perhaps if this drags on for a long time, I'll have to find a job here, Alice reasoned. Maybe I'll start a farm. Chickens, geese, maybe even a cow. After cleaning, she felt even hungrier. Seeing that it was time, Alice went to the store with relief. Walking through the village, she was surprised to notice that it seemed better here than in her childhood. Many new houses had appeared. Old ones were renovated and painted. The store, standing in the same place, gleamed with a new sign. The sign isn't printed, it's painted, Alice thought. Talented. Someone local? She went inside and was surprised by the cleanliness and coziness, as well as the variety of goods. The salesgirl, a young attractive woman, smiled warmly. Good morning, she said. You're our first customer today. Alice smiled back. Good morning to you too. Nice to hear. Did you come here for the summer? The girl asked. I don't know yet. How did you guess so quickly that I'm not local? There aren't that many residents here. I know everyone by face. Alice laughed. Right, I didn't think of that. I lived here until I was 17, then I moved to the city. She looked thoughtfully at the salesgirl. It's strange, you're younger than me, but not by much. In theory, I should remember you. The girl smiled. No, I came a year ago with my older brother. Is that so? Alice was surprised. To live? Yep. I didn't think anyone would voluntarily move to such a backwater. Alice felt slightly offended. You shouldn't say that, she said. It's very nice here, not far from the city, beautiful nature, clean air. My brother wanted to come here. He's an artist. Is that so? Alice exclaimed. So he painted the sign? It's very beautiful. Thanks, I'll tell him. But I've been chatting your ear off. You're here to shop. It was interesting. By the way, my name is Alice. Very nice to meet you. Daisy. The salesgirl held out a small, firm hand, which Alice shook. After that, Alice dictated her shopping list. Daisy quickly found everything needed and advised her on what to choose. In the end, the girls were happy with their meeting. Where do you live? Daisy asked. The second-to-last house on the edge of the village by the lake, Alice replied. That's great, Daisy exclaimed happily. My brother and I live in the last house. I'll definitely introduce you. Okay, Alice said. I'd be happy to. The weather was wonderful, and Alice decided to eat outside. She didn't feel like cooking, so she made cheese and sausage sandwiches on fresh bread, brewed tea, and went out onto the porch. The sun was shining, the birds were singing, and Alice sat, ate, and enjoyed the day. To her surprise, she realized she couldn't remember the last time she had just sat like this, without work, without plans, without thoughts of business. Suddenly, a meow sounded at her feet. Alice turned her head and saw a fat, striped cat that had silently climbed onto the porch. He was looking at her with interest, or rather, at the plate of sandwiches. Judging by your appearance, you're not starving, Alice remarked. The cat looked intently and persistently repeated, meow. All right, you little blackmailer, here you go. She pulled out a piece of sausage and gave it to him. The cat sniffed it, took it carefully, placed it on the porch, and began to eat. Enjoy your meal, Alice said and closed her eyes, enjoying the sun. But after a few seconds, the peace was disturbed again. Sandro, a male voice called out. Sandro, where are you? Ran off to the neighbors again? Alice looked at the cat, but he, even if he heard, didn't react at all. I think that's for you, Alice remarked. Sandro, are you here? The gate swung open, and she saw a handsome blue-eyed man with curly blonde hair and a small light brown beard. He clearly hadn't expected to see anyone but the cat, and was flustered. I'm so sorry. That's my cat. He keeps running off here, sometimes I come to catch him. Honestly, I haven't touched anything but the cat. Alice smiled. It's all right. You have a nice cat. She looked at Sandro, who was washing himself after finishing the sausage. He's already begged food from you too, his owner said regretfully. It's impossible to refuse him, Alice replied. You must be the artist, Daisy's brother? That's me, he said in surprise. I guess I haven't earned that title yet, but yes, I'm Daisy's brother, Arthur. He held out a hand, as firm as his sister's, but larger. Alice, the girl said, shaking his hand. Very nice to meet you. If I'd known someone was living here, I wouldn't have intruded so unceremoniously, he said. I only arrived yesterday, Alice replied. So you couldn't have known, and I met your sister a couple of hours ago at the store. Then that explains it. Are you staying long? I don't know yet. Most likely, yes. Arthur picked up the cat, who meowed discontentedly, but didn't resist. Feel free to visit us any time, Arthur said. I'm often home if I don't go out somewhere. My sister works until 6, then she'll be home too. All right, Alice replied. I'll drop by sometime. Give me a couple of days to settle in and get the house in order. Of course, Arthur replied. If you need help, just ask. The doors of our house are always open. Literally. The neighbor and the cat left, and Alice reached for her phone. She was waiting for a call from the lawyer with good news, or from Paul. Thinking of him, Alice immediately cursed. Business. I'll go do something useful. Alice spent the rest of the day cleaning the house. She washed the windows, swept away the cobwebs, vacuumed the furniture and the huge, heavy rug that had been in the room since her childhood. Her grandmother, it seemed, had never taken it out, cleaning it in place. It must have been made of quality material to have lasted so well, Only the colors had faded. Alice wanted to take it out, but she grabbed a corner and realized how heavy it was. Let it stay, she decided. Grandma didn't move it for a reason. The first few days were spent cleaning, leaving no time to think about anything else. But now that the house was in order, visiting the neighbors seemed like a good idea. Daisy is very sweet and lively, Alice thought. And we'll get along. She clearly has a business streak. Her brother is probably just a sweet eccentric. Well, you can talk to people like that too. Out of curiosity, she resolutely stood up, left the house, hung the old rusted lock, and went to the neighbors. She immediately noticed how different their house was. In her childhood, it must have been a simple village house, but now it was renovated, plastered, and painted a delicate salmon color. Beautiful, Alice thought, and unusual. She walked up to the gate and pushed it. It wasn't locked. An old SUV was parked in the yard. Daisy probably used it to go to the city for goods. And there were flowers growing in the yard, the most ordinary wildflowers. This was strange, as they were usually considered weeds and pulled up. "Arthur!" Alice called out. "Daisy!" "Meow!" came the reply. Sandra was sitting on the porch, squinting in the sun. "Hello, friend," Alice greeted him. "Where's your owner?" "I'm here." A voice sounded unexpectedly close, making her jump. Alice hadn't noticed she was standing by an open window. "Sorry, didn't mean to startle you." "It's all right. I just got bored at home. I remembered your invitation." Arthur smiled. "Very glad. My sister was upset you didn't come over. She wanted to drop by your place this evening." He winked slyly. "If you're not busy, we could take a walk. I'm looking for a new spot for a painting." Alice shrugged. She didn't like pointless walks, but there was nothing else to do. "Okay," she replied. "Then I'll come." Arthur went inside, and a couple of minutes later appeared with a huge backpack on his shoulders. "Ready," he said. "Let's go." "Shouldn't you close the door?" Alice reminded him. "And the windows. What if someone gets in?" He shrugged. "Everyone seems pretty decent around here. If someone decides to, that's on their conscience." What a philosophy, Alice thought, but said nothing. They went out the gate, and Arthur confidently led her along a path. Alice thought they would go to the lake where she used to swim as a child, but they walked past without stopping. "Tell me about yourself," Arthur suddenly asked. "You're so mysterious." Alice smiled. "I don't know why you think that. The house was empty, I needed a place to live, and I moved in, that's all." "Well, suit yourself. I won't pry. It's just that you're clearly not the kind of person who would come here by choice." "Then I can say that you and your sister are no less mysterious." He laughed. "That's true. What do you think? Should we stop here? It's not a bad spot." Talking, Alice didn't notice how they had reached a hill overlooking the lake. "It's beautiful," Alice admitted. "I lived here for so many years, but I never saw it from this angle." Arthur gave her a blanket. She spread it out and sat down. The artist took an easel, canvas, paints, and brushes from his backpack. The day was warm, but not hot, and she enjoyed the outing. "If I talk to you, will I bother you much?" she asked. Arthur shook his head negatively. "Not at all. My hands paint, my head can think about whatever it wants, and talking to such a smart, interesting girl will be doubly pleasant." Alice smiled. "Okay. Will you be offended if I ask something personal?" He shrugged. "I don't think I'm easily offended. You can try." "Your work. It's not very profitable, is it? Especially in a village." "True, but it's enough to live on. The main thing is doing what I love." "Just like your sister. She has a great store," Alice remarked. "It seems she knows how to run a business." Arthur smiled. "From the first glance, I realized you and Daisy are alike." Alice decided to be honest. "Yes. I relate to people who have a passion they are willing to give themselves to completely and get maximum results." "In monetary terms?" Arthur clarified with a smile. "And are you against money?" No, it's just that different people need different amounts of it. Many don't know how to earn money and comfort themselves by saying money isn't the main thing. She stopped herself, thinking that Arthur probably thought that. But the artist smiled. Well, I really do think that, he said. I'm not an ascetic. I don't want to live in a hut. But the life I lead suits me, and I'm happy. Well, I'm happy for you, Alice replied. But I'm not happy with my life right now. I lived in a huge apartment, drove a fancy car, had 100 people under me, and was absolutely miserable. Now I've lost everything, and I don't know when I'll get it back. And I'm not happy about that. The artist turned and looked at her. Strange, he said. When I first saw you, feeding the cat sausage, you looked completely happy. It was a moment. But life is made up of moments. Alice couldn't think of a reply. She just looked at the lake, remembering swimming there as a child until her lips were blue. Then she would run to her grandmother, who would rub her down with a towel and take her to the bathhouse. The heat in the bathhouse would penetrate to her bones. How good it felt afterwards to sit at the table, wrapped in a towel, and watch her grandmother fuss, pouring tea with milk, pushing pies towards her. But even later, in the city, she remembered her huge, expensive apartment downtown in a super modern complex. The best designer had done the renovation. But Alice was hardly ever there, always at work. Her expensive car? She drove it for 10 minutes in the morning and 10 minutes in the evening because there were no traffic jams. And work? Did it make her happy? Or was it the only place where she felt important, needed, where she was valued and praised? And to not lose that, Alice was ready to spend her whole life there. I don't even have any friends, she suddenly thought sadly. She had friends in university. They kept in touch at first. Then I kept refusing to meet because of work, and they stopped inviting me. Friends at work? Everyone there was either a subordinate or a competitor. It's strange that I even managed to start dating Paul. Lost in such thoughts, Alice didn't notice how time passed. She came to when Arthur spoke again. I think that's enough for today. Can I see? Alice asked. Of course. He stepped aside, and she saw the painting, and she was very surprised. Alice expected a landscape, but she saw herself. The lake and forest were in the background, blurred. Most of the painting was her. Her face was barely visible, but the pose, the lowered head, the inner state. Yes, you can really see how desperate I am here, Alice thought sadly. How did he manage to capture that? You didn't like it? Arthur asked anxiously. Alice forced herself to smile. It's unexpected, she said honestly. I didn't even notice you were painting me the whole time. Arthur smiled. Honestly, I didn't plan to. But I looked at you and realized I wouldn't rest until I captured this state of yours today. Alice gave an awkward chuckle. You definitely have talent. Thank you. Sorry if I embarrassed you. It's hard to embarrass me. He smiled. My sister will be back soon. How about we go back and make dinner? Haven't you gotten tired of me today? On the contrary, it's interesting. In the time I've been here, I've gotten to know all the residents. I wanted something new. And then there's you. Is that so? Am I just another new object for you? He laughed. Not just that. I was curious before about what you're really like, but I didn't expect to see you in person. Seeing Alice's confusion, the artist explained, Your neighbor, Uncle John, told me a lot about you. Alice chuckled. Is that so? And what did he say? That people like you are born rarely, special from childhood, bright like the sun, strong like the wind. Never doubted your abilities. No task was too big. Well, that's not quite true now, Alice remarked. Not at all. That's exactly how you look. She smiled sadly. Look at the painting. Clearly not. Arthur sighed. I understand you've been through something serious, but I think you didn't come back here by chance. Alice laughed. You're not just selfless, romantic, and altruistic, you're also a mystic? Arthur laughed. Too much? Yes, but you're right. Here, it's like I'm regaining my strength, and I'm glad about that. The cat was waiting for them on the porch. Sandro, Alice suddenly said. In honor of Sandro Botticelli? Yes, Arthur replied. It's cliché. Well then. The cat meowed expressively, and his owner frowned. I hoped living in nature would teach him to find his own food. He is finding it, Alice interjected, in his own way. It was cool inside Arthur's house. The walls, as she expected, were covered with paintings. You really are very talented, Alice said, looking at them. Thank you. Will you help with dinner? Of course. By the time Daisy arrived, everything was ready. Wow, she said, seeing Alice. I was just about to come over. They hugged. Alice was seeing Daisy for the second time, but felt an inexplicable sympathy. I've been bothering your talented brother all day, Alice said. Daisy laughed. Yes, he's almost a genius. Enough, Arthur grumbled. Let's eat. At dinner, Alice spoke about Arthur's paintings again. What I saw today is amazing. She addressed Daisy, hoping for her support. It's a crime that the paintings are just hanging here and no one sees them. Out of the corner of her eye, she noticed the artist frown, but continued. I can ask around among my contacts for someone who can help organize an exhibition. I'm sure Arthur is destined for huge success and fame. To her surprise, Daisy smiled and shook her head. Thank you for the offer, she replied. But we don't need that. What? Alice thought she had misheard. Okay, Arthur, but you, Daisy, I thought you were like me, business acumen and… We don't need fame, attention, or success, Arthur interrupted suddenly. We had reasons for coming here. I don't want big exhibitions. I want to live quietly and peacefully. Alice looked at the sister, and for a moment, it seemed to her that tears glistened in Daisy's eyes. What's happening? Alice wondered. I just wanted to help. All right, she said aloud. I've intruded. I see you have personal reasons. She cautiously stood up, stroked Sandro, who had settled on a chair. I've overstayed my welcome. It was a good day. Nice meeting you. Goodbye. The brother and sister were silent. Only when Alice stepped out the gate did a breathless Daisy catch up to her. Alice, wait! Alice turned around. The girl's reddened eyes spoke of tears. Forgive us, Daisy said suddenly. Honestly, I really want to be friends with you. And my brother liked you, which is rare. He tries not to let people close. There are reasons. We really want to be friends. And about the gallery. It's a wonderful offer, if not for the circumstances. It's a shame I can't tell you everything. She grabbed Alice's fingers with her small, strong hands and squeezed. Just, please, believe me. There are reasons why we are here and living a quiet life. Promise not to be offended. Okay, Alice replied. I won't. The days passed calmly. Alice called her lawyer, tried to contact the firm's management, but there was no news. The investigation is ongoing. When it will finish and what will happen is unclear. All she could do was wait, which was the worst. To keep herself busy, Alice started getting closer to her neighbors. She helped Daisy at the store. They went to the city for goods several times. Then Alice helped unload, arrange, and do paperwork. This isn't your level, she told her friend. You could handle a chain of supermarkets. Work for me, you'd be in charge of a huge department. Daisy smiled. I'm happy here. Alice noted the strange phrase but decided the time for details hadn't come yet. In her free time, she visited Arthur. Several times he took her out into nature, and Alice was surprised each time. She had lived here for so many years, but Arthur easily found places of such beauty that it took her breath away. It's just an artist's ability, he replied modestly. Another one of your talents, she clarified. The artist just shook his head. "You're a very interesting girl," he remarked. "When you meet strangers, you pretend to be cold, you act like people don't interest you, but in reality, you're very attentive and see the good in everyone, even things they don't suspect about themselves." Alice was flustered. "You're overpraising me. You underestimate yourself. I've never had problems with self-esteem. This is different." They were silent for a while. Alice watched Arthur sketch the clouds, wondering how he managed it. Suddenly, a question came to her mind. "Tell me," she asked, "how do you imagine your future in 10 or 20 years?" He sighed and looked into the distance. "That's too long a time," the artist replied. "For now, I can say I really like it here, and I want to stay forever." The last word sounded bleak, and Alice felt like putting something warm on to ward off the chills. She suddenly realized that with each passing day, she was becoming more attached to the village, to this brother and sister. 2 more weeks passed, and then the lawyer called. "Ms. Alice!" He was practically jumping on the phone. That's the tone used to convey either very good or very bad news. "The investigation is over! No violations!" he shouted. "We expect you in the office tomorrow. You can return to your apartment." Alice exhaled sharply and sat on the floor. Her head was spinning with the news. "You're not joking?" she asked just in case. The lawyer was taken aback. "Good heavens! Of course not." "Sorry, it's just unexpected. Thank you for the news." She put the phone on the floor, trying to compose herself. Of course this was wonderful, and she should be happy. But for some reason, she immediately thought that this meant leaving the village, returning to the endless work cycle without a minute's peace. "Meow!" Alice turned her head in surprise. It was hot, the door was open, only the old lace curtain hung there. Taking advantage of this, the cat was sitting inside the house and looking at her as if Alice owed him something. "You little rogue," Alice said. She stood up and cut a piece of sausage. The cat didn't look at the treat, persistently repeating, "Meow." "All right, Your Highness, there's nothing else. Eat this or go home." "Meow." Alice sighed, scooped up the cat, and went to the neighbors. "Arthur!" she called through the window. "I brought the cat." No one answered. "Arthur!" Silence. She could have left Sandro, but for some reason, Alice went inside. She saw Arthur immediately. He was lying on the floor unconscious. "Arthur!" She rushed to him, checked his pulse. Alive. She called Daisy, explained. "I'll be there in a minute," she replied. Alice was figuring out what to do. His heart was beating. He was breathing. She gently patted his cheek. Arthur tried to open his eyes. "Can you hear me?" Alice asked. "Hold on, I'll call an ambulance." "Don't," he whispered. "My sister." "I'm here!" Daisy rushed into the kitchen, returned with a glass of water and a pill. She helped her brother swallow it. Then they both moved him to the sofa. Making sure Arthur was out of danger, Daisy led Alice out onto the porch. "Do you know what's wrong with him?" Alice asked. Tears welled up in Daisy's eyes. "I do," she replied curtly. "It's hereditary. My mother had the same thing." Alice couldn't find the words. "No, it's a severe nervous system disorder. There's an injection, it's expensive. It costs so much that no foundation can help." Alice swallowed. The decision came instantly. "Tell me how much." Daisy named the sum. Alice whistled. "Exactly," Daisy said with a bitter smile. "We don't have enough money. That's why we left. Arthur wants to paint while he can, to live these years peacefully with me." And she started to cry. Alice silently hugged her. Her head was occupied with other things. She spent the rest of the day on the phone. Even after selling her apartment, car, and withdrawing all her money, she was still short of the required sum. "Where could she get it?" she asked aloud. "Oh, Grandma, if you were alive, no matter how poor we were, you always came up with something, found money somewhere." She remembered how, when asked about the source of the money, Martha would say, "The house spirit gave it. But you can't just take it, only for a great need." Alice had trouble falling asleep. She was thinking about her grandmother, so she was hardly surprised when she opened her eyes and saw her by the bed. Her grandmother was gently stroking her head. "Grandma!" Alice exclaimed in surprise. "Am I dreaming?" "Of course, my little one. Did I do something wrong?" "You're doing everything right, dear. I just don't understand. You're living in my house, you've cleaned everything. But why haven't you shaken out the rug?" Alice didn't know what to say. Her grandmother smiled and disappeared. Alice woke up with a pounding heart. She grabbed the heavy rug and started rolling it up. "Nonsense," she muttered. "I've gone mad." But suddenly she saw a nearly invisible square trapdoor on the floor. There was no handle, so she had to pry it open with a knife. The trapdoor yielded, revealing a passage into a small cellar, the size of a closet. Alice shone a flashlight and saw an old metal chest at the bottom. Unable to believe her eyes, she opened the lid and gasped. "Well, how is he?" Alice asked Daisy. She hadn't been able to make it to Arthur's discharge from the hospital because of business in the city, but she rushed over immediately. "He's sleeping," Daisy said. "Sorry, I'd invite you in, but I'm afraid of waking him." "Come over to my place," Alice suggested. The girl nodded. At Alice's house, at the table, Daisy said, "I haven't even properly thanked you for saving my brother. Thank you. I'll never forget it. You're like a sister to me now. Perhaps this is the first truly good thing I've done in my life." "Don't say that. You're a very good person. I know you sold your apartment, your car, withdrew all your money, and also—" She looked at Alice sheepishly. Alice laughed. "Yes, I also found treasure in my grandmother's house. It sounds incredible." "Exactly. Do you think your grandmother knew?" "Of course. She hinted at it when I was a child, told me fairy tales. I didn't understand or didn't believe her. She didn't want to use it herself, didn't consider it hers. You can only take it for a special need. And that's what happened." Daisy smiled. "It's strange to ask," she said. "But do you regret that things turned out this way? Not about saving my brother or meeting us. Because otherwise all your property, money, treasures would have stayed with you. And now you only have your work." Alice smiled. "I don't have work either. I wrote my resignation letter today." Daisy's eyes widened. "What? But what about everything you talked about? Your career? Achievements?" "No, I don't regret it. I would have had a lot of money. But it wouldn't have made me happier. It's strange to say, but I suddenly realized that I had been striving for success and wealth my whole life. Having gotten everything, I didn't become happier. Losing the money, even temporarily, helped me understand this. It was easy to trade everything for Arthur's life and health. I know him a little, but I'm sure he understands what life is and values it." Daisy's eyes filled with tears. She quickly wiped them away. "And what about you? Will you stay with us?" Alice smiled. "For now, yes. I don't know what's next. But right now, I'm happy here. I'm glad we met." "And we're glad," Daisy replied. "Very." They talked for a while longer. Then Daisy went home. A few days later, Arthur grew stronger and visited his rescuer himself. "Shall we go for a walk?" he asked. "Are you allowed?" Alice asked doubtfully. "If I stay lying down, I'll die. I feel good." They walked along the same path to the hill. "Well, I'll be," Alice said in surprise. "Only a little time has passed, but it feels like a lifetime." Arthur smiled. As before, he spread out the blanket, and they sat down next to each other. "In my opinion," he replied, "that's the beauty of life. Sometimes hundreds of years pass the same way, and sometimes in a few weeks you experience enough to last a lifetime." Alice smiled. "I remember," she said, "how we sat here and you asked if I believed everything happened for a reason." "Yes, that happened. I was terribly angry with you then," Alice admitted. "I thought you were an eccentric who didn't know life, imagining yourself a romantic and a philosopher." Arthur laughed. But every word is true. That's who I am. That's only part of you. You and your sister are amazing people. Now I'm sure our meeting is destiny. He turned his head, looking at her with curiosity. You never cease to surprise me, Alice. As I said, you see the good in people, even though you didn't show it at first. I'm surprised you're not willing to admit the good in yourself. You know you're smart, hardworking, you'll achieve success. But you stubbornly refuse to admit that you're a wonderful person, worthy of love and friendship, someone impossible not to love. It's as if you do everything to be considered cold and unfeeling. If my sister and I helped you see your true self, I'm very happy. Alice felt hot tears. She didn't hold them back, moving closer to Arthur. He put his arm around her, and she rested her head on his shoulder. Words weren't needed. They sat, looking at the lake illuminated by the sun, and Alice felt as if a huge weight had fallen from her shoulders, a weight she had carried since childhood. She didn't know what would happen next. Would she and Daisy remain friends? Would there be a relationship with Arthur? But she was absolutely sure of one thing. She would never again lose her true self.